Hey everyone, Josh here, Wargaming Noob Historical, back with another read-through review. This time around, campaign book, Bolt Action, Ostfront, Barbarossa to Berlin, a great addition to your Bolt Action gameplay stable. So as with all read-through reviews, we're just going to go briefly through the entire campaign book so you can get a taste of what's in here. As with all campaign books, they are focused on historical campaigns, and this will be featuring most of the Eastern Front action during World War II. We're going to go to the contents here. So the campaigns are broken into a number of different famous operations. We have Kalk and Gull, which is the conflict early in the war between the Japanese and the Soviets. We also have the Winter War, which is the conflict between the Finns and the Soviets. We have Operation Barbarossa, Case Blue. We also have Operation Citadel, Bagration to Berlin, and then a number of scenario rules, and that's what the majority of this book will be about. As with all campaign books, this really expands the gameplay for you as a bolt action player and gives you more of a historical feel as you play your way through the game. Without further ado, let's go ahead and see what's inside. The first conflict covered in the campaign book is Kalk and Gull. This is the conflict between the Japanese and the Soviet Union in 1939. You're going to have your background information on the battle itself. And then the main portion for this campaign will be the scenarios. The general scenarios that you can use are envelopment, maximum attrition, point defense, and hold until relieved. You also have two specific scenarios that are for Kalk and Gull. That's Cavalry Clash and Stormy Night. Terrain obviously will be broken down here. Let's picture the Japanese. So Scenario 1, Cavalry Clash, the information on how to set this up for the battle. And then Scenario 2, Stormy Night. And again, to extend your campaign, you can use the general scenarios that were outlined at the beginning of this section. Your theater selectors, you want to use Imperial Japanese Kwantung Army. This requires at least a second lieutenant and then 2 IJA infantry squads. And then you can fill out the rest of your selector with headquarters, infantry, artillery, armored cars, and tankettes, and all that fun stuff. On the Soviet side, you're going to be using the Soviet Transbaikal Military District Selector. This will, at minimum, require an inexperienced lieutenant, and then 2 inexperienced LMG squads, and again, you can fill out the rest of your selector with headquarters, infantry, and all that. Additional units include the Japanese Manchukuo Cavalry Squad. For the Soviets, you can include a BA-3 or 6 heavy armored car. You have options for flags for both sides, and then the horse-drawn limber. And that's the Kalk and Gull conflict for the book. Alright, next up we have the Winter War. This is the early conflict between the Soviets and the Finns. You're going to have your background information on the conflict itself. This picture of the Finns. So, interesting to note in this particular section of the book are a couple legendary units that you can use for the Finns. This is Simo Haiha. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but this is the infamous White Death, a very famous sniper on the Finn side. Here's his cost and his special rules. Next you have Lieutenant Laurie Torney, or aka Larry Thorne. Here's his information as well as point cost and special rules. You have more fluff on the Red Army here. And then we get to the section about using this for bolt action. The general scenarios that you can use for Winter War are envelopment, maximum attrition, point defense, hold until relieved, top secret, and demolition, as well as a couple Winter War specific scenarios. That's assault on the Mannerheim line and pocketed. Includes information on how to set up your table with terrain. And then the theater selectors that you want to use are the Finnish theater selector for Winter War, which can be found in the Armies of Italy and the Axis book. And then you're going to have a dedicated Winter War theater selector, which you're going to see shortly. Scenario 3, Assault on the Mannerheim Line. This is the forces that you use, your setup, deployment, what your table is going to look like, your objective, and victory conditions. And then you have Scenario 4 pocketed. You have the same information here, the forces that you can use, your setup, objective, and victory conditions. This is the theater selector for the Red Army Winter War Forces. At minimum, you'll need an inexperienced lieutenant, an inexperienced commissar, and 2 inexperienced LMG or NKVD squads. You can fill out the rest of your selector with headquarters infantry and all that stuff. Additional units for the Soviets, you can use the D8 light armored car, the FAI light armored car, an SMK T-100 experimental heavy tank, as well as the OT-130 light flamethrower tank. And that's the Winter War portion of this book. Alright, next up we have Operation Barbarossa, also known as the big one for this particular campaign book. This is a wide-ranging conflict that's going to involve any number of different units from several different army books. Let's go through it. So just background information on the battle itself. There's going to be several pages of this because this was a huge conflict during the war. And as we get to the end of the background information, here is the fighting it. Here's the way that you can fight this in bolt action. For the general scenarios, you want to use envelopment, maximum attrition, point defense, hold until relieved, top secret, and demolition. You can also use the scenarios from the Winter War section of the book, assault on the Mannerheim line, as well as pocketed. And then there are specific scenarios, Bridgehead and Hedgehog, for Operation Barbarossa. This is what your terrain information is going to be for the conflict, the way you want to set your table up. So the theater selectors you want to use are going to be found in armies of Germany, armies of Italy and the Axis, and the armies of the Soviet Union. For the Soviets, you can also use the Cock and Gull and Winter War sections in this conflict. So Scenario 5, the Bridgehead, your forces and setup right here. Objective and victory conditions and any special rules. Scenario 6, Hedgehog, same thing, your forces, special rules, victory conditions. And then additional units for the Germans, you can use the Goliath Demolition Anti-Tank Team. You can use the Sturm Pioneer Assault Engineer Squad. You can also have Brandenburger's German Special Forces Squad. There's information on the Brandenburgers. Also a legendary unit, Otto Skorzeny. Here's his point cost and special rules. Picture of the Germans fighting against the Soviets. You can also use the Flammpanzer B2F, the 3.7 centimeter Pak 35-36, the Opel Blitz with Flak 38. Finally, you can use the motorcycle with machine gun sidecar BMW R75, as well as the artillery Schlepper VA 601B. So a very huge section for the Germans. Obviously, because you can use all the theater selectors, or some of the theater selectors from the 3 army books above, as well as the Winter War and Kalk and Gull selectors for the Soviets. It's going to be a wide-ranging conflict and will add a lot of variety for your bolt action game. Continuing on with the Germans and the Soviets, we have Case Blue. Here's all the background information on this portion of the conflict. You do have a legendary unit you can use for the Soviets, Vasily Zaitsev, legendary sniper. Here's his point cost and his special rules. And as we go through the fluff, we will get to the fighting it with bolt action. The general scenarios that you could use are envelopment, point defense, hold until relieved, and top secret. You could also use scenario pocketed, Bridgehead, and Hedgehog. And then you'll have your Case Blue special scenarios, the Volga crossings, and block busting. Case Blue theater selectors you're going to want to use are in armies of Germany, armies of Italy and the Axis, and armies of the Soviet Union. And then additional units for Case Blue will be below. Here's the Germans. So Scenario 7, the Volga crossings, your forces set up, special rules, a lot of city fighting, reinforcements, deployment. Your objective and victory conditions, And then you have Scenario 8, Blockbusting. Again, forces, deployment setup, special rules. A lot of city fighting, because at this point you're getting into right before and during the Battle of Stalingrad. Lastly, the additional units you can use for the Soviets are the Su-76 and the M30, and that's case blue. Alright, next up we have Operation Citadel. Here's all of the background information on the conflict. It's quite a bit of it. Finally, we get to the fighting the battle with bolt action. The scenarios you can use are envelopment, maximum attrition, point defense, hold until relieved, top secret, and demolition. You can also spin in Stormy Night, assault on the Mannerheim Line, Bridgehead, and Hedgehog. And then there are 2 Citadel special scenarios, Pack Front and Olkavodka Heights, as well as the terrain setup and all that information. Theater selectors you can use are found in the armies of Germany and armies of Soviet Union, and then there are additional units shown below. There's the Ferdinand facing off against artillery. So, Scenario 9, Pack Front, your forces, setup, deployment, and special rules. Objective and victory conditions. And then Scenario 10, Olkavodka Heights, your forces and setup, deployment, special rules, victory conditions. So additional units for the Germans, you can use the Ferdinand tank destroyer and the RSO Pak 40. And then lastly, you can use the Begleit Stug Escort Infantry Squad and the Strafe Battalion Penal Infantry Squad, and that's Operation Citadel. Finally, we've reached the last conflict of the book, Bagration to Berlin. There are going to be several pages of background information on this conflict. Pictures of Germans in Berlin. So fighting the battle with bolt action, you can use scenarios envelopment, maximum attrition, point defense, hold until relieved, top secret, demolition, as well as the other scenarios included in this book. Stormy Night, assault on the Mannerheim Line, pocketed, Bridgehead, Hedgehog, and blockbusting. There are also special rules on unequal struggle from page 41. There are lastly 2 Bagration to Berlin scenarios, Breakout and Battle of Berlin, information on terrain, what if scenarios, and then the selectors that you want to use are found in armies of Germany, in armies of the Soviet Union, and then any units that are previously noted in the book. Scenario 11, Breakout, your forces, special rules, victory conditions. Scenario 12, Battle of Berlin, your forces, setup, objective, deployment, and victory conditions. You also have special rules for city fighting and reinforcements. Additional units on the Soviet side, the Bielski Partisan Squad, late war, point costs, and special rules. IS-3 heavy tank, BM-3112 heavy Katyusha. For the Germans, you have the 33rd Waffen-SS Grenadier Division, Charlemagne. You have the Flamm Panzer 38T Hetzer. You have the Panzerjagdfahrzeugen auf Fahrgestell-Brenn. Hopefully I pronounced that right. You also have equipment options that you can use. You have German night fighting units, Panzer V Panther Offs-G with IR equipment. And lastly, you have the SDKFZ 25120 Uhu and the Nachtjager Squad, and that is your Bagration to Berlin section of the book. Alright, we finally reached the last part of the book. These are the scenario rules. I'm just going to blow through these real quickly. You have rules for snow, mud, ice, frostbite. You also have dug-in rules, digging in during the game. You have night fighting and minefields. Lots of new stuff. You got city fighting, because obviously a lot of the conflicts will be in Stalingrad and the surrounding area, as well as Berlin. And that's pretty much it for the book itself. As with all campaign books for bolt action, if you're looking to add new flavor or new historical battles to your gameplay, getting a campaign book helps you to do that. This is specifically Ostfront, Barbarossa to Berlin, so you're going to have a lot of Germans, you're going to have a lot of Soviets and new units and all that stuff. But what's also nice is that it covers the entire breadth of the war. So if you're not interested in playing Germans and Soviets, you also have the option to play Soviets against the Japanese or the Soviets against the Finns in both the Kalk and Gull and Winter War conflicts. Definitely a great way to add something different to your bolt action games. All the new scenarios, all the new rules, definitely expand bolt action for you as a player. So definitely a must buy, especially if you want to fight in this portion of World War II, mainly the Eastern Front. So, alright, that's it. If you like this, go ahead and click like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I appreciate it if you would. Click the bell notification icon to get notified of all new read-through reviews coming out of the channel, and then click the link in the description below to join our Discord server. That is the best way I can personally interact with you and chit-chat to you about bolt action and any other game that we cover on the channel. That's it. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more read-through reviews from Wargaming Noob Historical.